The Second World War would see the use of aircraft carriers on a grand scale. The United States, Great Britain, and the Imperial Japanese Navy would all make great use of these huge vessels. Having the ability to deploy aircraft in the middle of the ocean for offensive and indeed defensive operations gave these navies amazing capabilities. The German Navy, however, were much more focused on battleships and their huge fleet of U-boats. So why was there no World War II German aircraft carriers? Well, you may be surprised to hear that there actually was, and believe it or not, it was actually enormous. In today's video, we look at the Graf Zeppelin, the German aircraft carrier of World War II. If you enjoy this video and want to see more, hit the subscribe button. It's free and really helps the channel reach more history lovers like you. Following the end of the First World War, the Treaty of Versailles placed severe restrictions on all branches of the German military. For the Kriegsmarine, the Navy during the interwar years, they were restricted to just 15,000 men, with only 6 pre-dreadnought battleships, 6 light cruisers, 12 destroyers, and 12 torpedo boats. Aircraft carriers and submarines weren't allowed at all. With Adolf Hitler coming to power in 1933, he began to make sweeping changes to Germany and its military powers. He increasingly began to defy the treaty and became more brazen with his orders as time went on. In 1935, he renamed the Navy to the Kriegsmarine and placed Admiral Erich Raeder in charge. In the same year, Hitler ordered the construction of a huge aircraft carrier for his newly created navy. She would eventually be named the Graf Zeppelin, after Ferdinand von Zeppelin, the World War I airship creator. But due to limited space for it to be built, the construction itself didn't start straight away. More pressing projects, such as the huge battleship known as the Bismarck, took priority over the carrier. Eventually though, in December 1936, space opened up in a shipyard in the city of Kiel, and construction on the Mammoth project began. The design of the Graf Zeppelin intended it to have a length of 262 metres or 861 feet, with a beam of 36 metres or 118 feet. For reference, this is virtually the same size as the USS Saratoga, one of the more famous US Navy carriers of the war. The vessel's displacement would be some 34,000 tons, with 4 large turbines allowing for a maximum of 33 knots and a range of 8,000 nautical miles or 15,000 kilometres. The main offensive weapons at its disposal, given the type of vessel, were of course its aircraft. The intended number of planes was 42, which would comprise of 10 Messerschmitt Bf-109s, 12 Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers, and 20 Feisler 167 biplane torpedo bombers. Its defensive complement varied somewhat over time. Originally designed for 8 15cm naval guns, the eventual output would see it grow to 8 twin 15cm encased guns, effectively doubling the number of barrels to 16. These guns would allow the Graf Zeppelin to hit enemy ships, as well as naval bombardment of the shore if necessary. Of course, being a significant target for the Allies, it featured an array of anti-air power, around 12 10.5cm Flak 38s, and in the vicinity of 20 3.7cm and nearly 30 2cm flak guns. These would be spread throughout the ship. The crew would be in the vicinity of 1,700 sailors as well as additional air crews. In December 1938, 2 years after her construction begun, the Graf Zeppelin was christened by her namesake and launched from her dry dock. At that time she was around 85% complete. As you can see by the picture, her flight deck was finished and she appears like the completed product. But there were still significant items to be added for her to become an operational aircraft carrier. She lacked an island, the position which comprises the bridge and flight control area. She also was yet to receive the requisite communication equipment, and the majority of her guns were yet to be installed. In the preceding months, as the fit-out began, the job of designing the aircraft, which would call the Graf Zeppelin home, fell to the Luftwaffe's commander, Hermann Göring. A textbook narcissist, Goering wanted control of anything involving German aircraft throughout the war, so delays to the development of the carrier's planes fell squarely at his feet. The following year, Germany would invade Poland, and the Allied powers would declare war. Because of this, critical resources intended to help complete the Graf Zeppelin began to be diverted away. Goering's attention was turned elsewhere, and once the invasion of France and the Low Countries began, the carrier's development was starting to waver. But it was the invasion of Norway in April 1940 which saw the completion of the Graf Zeppelin well and truly pushed to the wayside. It became apparent to Admiral Raeder that he needed anti-aircraft and naval guns to protect his ports all along the Norwegian coastline. With the aircraft carrier's planes still not being developed any further by Goering, Raeder asked Hitler for the guns to be stripped from the carrier and sent to Norway. Hitler agreed and sealed her fate, at least for the foreseeable future. Between July 1940 and April 1942, Graf Zeppelin was towed from her port in Kiel to a port in northern Poland. From there, she fulfilled the role of a storage facility for timber, a far cry from her initial intention of being a flagship of the Kriegsmarine. But as she languished in a Polish port for 2 years, the successful use of aircraft carriers across the globe became apparent. In May 1941, the use of torpedo bombers launched from the British aircraft carrier HMS Ark Royal resulted in the steering system of Germany's best battleship, the Bismarck, being disabled. Without her steering, the Royal Navy eventually closed in on the Bismarck, and she would sink after the ensuing battle. Another success would come on December 7th of the same year. 6 aircraft carriers of the Imperial Japanese Navy would launch over 350 aircraft in an attack on the strategic US port of Pearl Harbor. The resulting engagement would see US losses including 4 battleships sunk, 4 battleships damaged, several other ships sharing the same fate, and nearly 2,500 sailors and airmen killed. The obvious victories due to the use of aircraft carriers was enough to convince Hitler the project to complete Graf Zeppelin should be pushed ahead. Raeder agreed and believed she could be completed within 18 months. But with the newfound enthusiasm to complete the ship came more issues. Goering again was causing delays with the aircraft, he claimed due to the Luftwaffe already being strained to keep up with demand of its current force. He suggested Raeder use existing aircraft, which could be converted to use on the carrier, rather than waiting for new ones to be designed and built. The issue with Goering's suggestion was the weight of the existing aircraft. It meant stronger winches and catapults were needed on the carrier, as well as reinforcement of the flight deck, hangars, and elevators. Because so much time had passed since she was first designed, there were also more modern pieces of equipment to be added. Advancements in radio communication and radar detection required significant additional equipment to be established. Learning from Allied carrier mistakes and improvements, areas in anti-aircraft defense also needed to be added. As these improvements began, the aircraft carrier would be targeted by the Royal Air Force for the first and last time. On the 27th of August 1942, 3 Avro Lancasters armed with 2.5-ton bombs would fly over the city of Sottenhafen and drop their payloads. Unfortunately, the raid would be unsuccessful, and she would be towed back to the port in Kiel and put in the dry dock. While engineers and dockworkers were completing their work on the ship, by the start of 1943, Hitler had become frustrated with the Kriegsmarine. After failing in most of his promises, Raeder was removed from his position and replaced by Admiral Karl Dönitz. Prior to becoming the overall naval commander, Dönitz was the commander of the U-boat fleet, probably the only area of the Kriegsmarine that had actually lived up to Hitler's expectations. Therefore, Hitler trusted Dönitz with making improvements to the overall force. Unfortunately for the surface fleet, including the Graf Zeppelin, Dönitz convinced Hitler the way towards ultimate victory would be through the use of U-boats. Unsurprisingly, Hitler agreed, and most surface vessels were stripped of their guns and sent for scrap. The carrier, though, managed to avoid this fate and was towed not far from the city of Stettin. She would see out the rest of the war at that location, with minimal work being completed. As Soviet forces closed in on Poland in April 1945, the crew responsible for her upkeep scuttled the ship and she sank. But due to the shallow waters, this didn't destroy her completely. The Soviets would later raise her and then tow the ship to an area off the coast of northern Poland. By then it was 1947 and the Cold War was underway. The Soviets wanted to test their abilities at sinking an aircraft carrier and would utilise the ship as target practice, eventually destroying the vessel, which would sink below the waves in an unknown location. It wouldn't be until 2006 when a Polish research vessel would come across a sunken wreckage off the coast of Poland. Following closer inspection, it was determined that in fact it was indeed the wreckage of the once promising Graf Zeppelin. From her early beginnings, this beautiful vessel had so much potential, but due to so many factors working against her, she would never be fully operational. A real shame certainly for the Kriegsmarine, as the carrier's use throughout the war would have been a very interesting spectacle, and one which, who knows, could have turned the tide for Germany. What are your thoughts on the Graf Zeppelin? Do you think if operational it would have had a significant impact on the war? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. As always guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to expand your knowledge and join the growing Premier History community.